Hey everyone, welcome to Worship Artistry. I'm Jason.
I'm Nick.
Nick, it's good to see you, man.
It's great to see you, buddy.
It feels like it's been a while since we've sat on these couches. We're out running around, doing all kinds of cool stuff.
All kinds of fun stuff. Still dressing similarly.
Apparently, guys, we're like becoming like an old married couple. Like every time we see each other, we're like, oh, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah, every new video, I'm like, nice shirt choice.
Yep.
It's the same as mine, basically.
We didn't plan this, guys.
We don't.
Believe it or not, this was not on purpose.
We don't even live close together. That's funny, but yeah, man. So what are we talking about today?
Well, I like to use this podcast to learn about things I don't understand and want to understand.
100%, yeah.
It's like a great excuse to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I made my record,
yep,
which is still coming out.
Oh.
Can't wait. Next
you have a new single coming out?
Yeah, next single's coming out.
Yeah.
The ones I'm more excited. The first one was like it's like an older song.
Sure.
You're like, that one had to make the record.
Yeah.
Now we're starting to get into the fun ones.
The ones Jason's really likes.
Yeah. So, but one thing I found is, you think about the process. You're like, okay, I got to get the money to do this. I have to record it. I have to have the songs. I got demos, all these different things. Mm-hmm. And you get done with all that and you're like, man, it feels really good. And then you're like, no, you got to get it mastered now.
Well,
and I'm like, well, that's just making it loud, right? Like, can't we just put
bump that slider?
You can do that, right? And it turns out that's not the way.
That's not
the way it works. And so I was introduced to my new friend Robbie Artress over at Peak Mastering, and he did an amazing job. And so he took the actual song, mastered it. It sounded better.
Yeah.
He also has a product that he does an online mastering. It's kind of like an AI mastering thing. He creates these presets and whatever.
Gotcha.
And so what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the song unmastered.
Okay.
Then mastered using his ears. And then we'll throw a preset on there.
Gotcha.
So we can hear the difference there. All right, we're back at the desk, and we're going to listen to the song You Are a Mountain, just a section. And this is the mix I received from my mixing person, Mike Adele, mix engineer, whatever. And this is what it sounds like. This is before mastering. And I will not fear the valley that surrounds me, 'cause I'm on the mountain. Okay, sounds great. Mike Adele, great job. But now I'm going to show you the mastered version. This is what I sent out to Robbie Artress over at Peak Mastering, and he used his ears and sat there and listened into a room, and it sounds like this. And I will not fear the valley that surrounds me, 'cause I'm on the mountain. Okay, that sounds better, right? Like it's not just louder, it's a little more expansive. It feels like it just has more life underneath it. Now here's the thing. Robbie Artress also has a service called Peak Mastering, and it's an online tool, and you can just take your unmastered music and drop it in there. And so I thought, okay, I have the human version, but I actually want to hear what it sounds like now, kind of doing that process and hear how that sounds. So let's go ahead and pull up Peak Mastering. All right, make every demo sound like a master. Sounds great. We're going to go ahead and I'm just going to drag and drop the file. This is the unmastered version. And it looks like I can pick a preset here. So mine's kind of more acoustic sounding. But let's see what else is here. Yeah, I'm just going to go with Acoustic Worm because that's kind of how I instructed him to do it. Just kind of sounding more natural sounding. So let's hear that. Okay, it's all complete. Looks like I can log in and download it, but I'm just going to listen to it from right here. And I will not fear the valley that surrounds me, 'cause I'm on the mountain. Okay, now that sounds pretty good. Let's hear it against the original in the program. 'Cause I'm on the mountain. It's pretty wild. Yeah, I'm really kind of blown away. I mean, obviously, I'm going to prefer the human ear, just because there's just a lot more. But I think about it, if I was doing demos, or if I was doing kind of prep or arrangements, something like this, to really hear it all in one shot and just kind of get a reference and idea of how it's going to sound, man, I think it's pretty amazing. Well, back to the couch.
It sounded like it wasn't just making it loud, like a lot of people kind of think mastering is and can be.
Yeah. I wish, I would love to understand all the things that go into that.
Me too, yeah.
So I just wish I had somebody to talk to about it who knew what they were talking about.
I wish we could get a hold of Robbie.
Well, guess what?
Yeah?
He's right here.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what is it really, like, just in too long didn't read form? What do you do?
So, for me personally, I produce, mix, master music here in Nashville, and just try to keep busy doing all of it, and have been doing more mastering work lately, and kind of being on both sides of things, being a producer, mixer, sending songs to get mastered, and also receiving songs to master, and even mastering stuff that I've mixed myself. Kind of just started a fun little side project, this peak mastering thing. And the goal for that was, with AI mastering, and there's a few other online services, and Ozone, and I like playing around with all that stuff, and I wanted to just create something for specifically the original thought was my friends here in Nashville who are writing songs and doing a lot of demos, and the more finished a demo sounds, the better chance someone's going to pay attention to it. And
for sure.
So I noticed there weren't a lot of presets or services that were specifically focused on certain genres, and just kind of all of them, to me, felt like they crushed things a little bit too much and did too much. And when I send songs to a professional mastering engineer, I always prefer when it comes back, still sounding like my mix, just better, like the best version of my mix. And so that was kind of the thought behind the peak mastering thing, was just trying to create something that can emulate that experience, but on more of a budget, and kind of geared more towards, the audio quality could be, it's doing everything that would be necessary to release a song, but I was kind of thinking more, like the workflow of, you're creating a new demo every day, and just something to bounce ideas off of that is a little less heavy-handed and a little more like what you would get out of a real mastering engineer, if that makes sense.
So so for those of us who are kind of dumb, can you really explain what mastering is? Because I always thought of it, I've made records over my lifespan, and initially I thought it just makes everything the same volume on a record. And then sometimes it's like, oh, it just makes it loud. But I don't think I really understand the nuances around it, because I can tell it makes it sound different. But can you talk a little bit about like what is actually involved and what it really means to master a song?
Oh, great question. So the first part of it, the way I think of mastering, and I think traditionally, it started out historically as kind of a technical step to get, tape to the final release format, so vinyl back in the day. And, that was a real technical process, but it still involved, some artistic side of it as well, some EQ just to make everything fit. And like you mentioned, loudness across from song to song, just making the whole thing cohesive. And so now, and when everyone's kind of releasing things digitally, sometimes on CD, mastering it's still the last artistic step and kind of a quality control on that. And then just a technical step between the mix and the production and the final release format. And so a lot of times it's a real subtle difference, because I think a lot of mastering engineers assume that, you know, the mix they're receiving, tons of people have already heard it, already love it. You know, hours and hours have gone into creating that. So it's just about making it translate well on, you know, as many platforms, iPhone speakers, AirPods, and, you know, not getting in the way of the artistic intent and emotion of the song, and just trying to enhance that to the next level. And, you know, you're thinking about, a lot of mixing engineers and producers just don't want to think about dither, fade ins, fade outs. And like you said, getting each song to kind of live as a cohesive thing if you're mastering an album. But even singles, it's just making sure technically there's no buzzes or hums or clicks. And then also just some real subtle EQ, cleaning up maybe if the mixer's room has a deficiency in it. And then, yeah, sometimes people want it as loud as possible. And so that's part of it too. Ideally not, but you get asked that a lot.
Sure, louder is always better. Everybody knows that.
That's what that means.
That's how you know it sounds good. It's loud.
Yeah,
it's loud, so that's good.
If it's just not pinned in the red, I don't want to listen to it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
For sure.
Finally
somebody gets
Finally,
it.
somebody gets it.
Yeah.
Gosh, thank you, Robbie. That's amazing. So how long have you been doing this type of work then?
So I have been, I mean, really, you know, in a way, since I've been recording, you know, my own band in high school, you know, we weren't paying a mastering engineer to master our songs. So, you know, I was always trying to learn about it, and as I mix, and then, you know, there's just been several projects along the way, you know, over the years. I guess been producing, mixing, all of it since, I guess it's been at least 15 years now, trying to do the math on the fly.
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
And so, you know, like just kind of gradually, you know, even demos, and, you know, sometimes it's just kind of like, you know, the artist doesn't have money to pay for a master, so I'll just do the master. And then more and more over, you know, maybe the last 5 to 7 years, more artists have been coming to me, you know, just for the mastering as well. And so, you know, there's some people who only think of me as their mastering guy, but then there's other people that only think of me as their producer that don't even know I'm doing the mastering too. It's, you know, but I like, you know, coming at it from all angles. And, you know, when I'm mastering something, I know what it's like to be on the other side of that. And so trying not to overdo it and do too much when I know that's not what I would want to get back, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, yeah. So could you walk us through like a typical mastering session for you? Do you get like a stereo track, or do you have access to all the mixed stems and all of that? And what I guess also, what do you prefer? What would you like to work with? But kind of walk us through that process on a typical mastering.
Totally. So I think for me personally, I would prefer to get just the stereo mix to start with. And then there's times where the vocal is just buried and you just can't quite dig it out, or, you know, you run into sometimes the vocal super bright, but the track is real dark and you're just trying to make a compromise. So there's situations where it's nice to receive both, you know, the instrumental and the lead vocal or the a cappella track. But when you split those things out, you know, you're always losing a little bit of that. If the mixer was using compression, you know, I want to get as close to what everyone has been listening to as possible. And so ideally to start with, I would get, the heated limited version that the artist and producer love, mixer loves. If the mixer has been mixing into a limiter and it's real loud, which is pretty standard now, I want to hear that version, but then also maybe a version with a trim before the limiter, just to leave more headroom, to do some EQ before another final limiter and, at least match that loudness, but sometimes it just needs to be taken down a notch or pushed a little bit more. And it's just kind of about what the music needs.
So when you look at, you do all styles of music, right? Like you're not just, I just do worship or I just do Americana or whatever. Like you do all different kinds. How do you approach those differently? Like do different styles need different things?
Definitely. There's not like a, specific limiter or specific plugin that I would use on one style versus another. But if I'm, any new project, especially if I haven't worked with the artist before, or if it's a new sound for them, I'll pull in a few references that I think sound good. And, if they send me a reference like, hey, we're kind of going for this, that's always helpful to just kind of listen and calibrate just to make sure you're not going way off, in the wrong direction. And so, yeah, some genres need more low end, some need real hyped, compressed top end. But it really just kind of depends on what they're going for and where you're starting from, what it needs to go the rest of the way. Sometimes I've had, 10 plugins on a master, and then there's others where I'm using 2 plugins and, maybe treating the verse and chorus differently, to make the chorus feel like a big lift. But it's kind of all even across different songs on the same album. I might be doing totally different things personally.
So you said plugins. So do you use any outboard gear or anything like that at all as well, or just plugins for the mastering?
I have a couple of outboard gear. I have an SSL bus compressor, but honestly, I stick with plugins most of the time, just for
Sure, yeah.
It's easy to recall, and I could talk about analog versus digital all day for hours.
Oh, yeah,
I have many opinions on it, and I think there's something that analog does that hasn't been recreated digitally. There's some plugins that get close, but then there's also things that digital can do that no analog gear can do. And I think just for the workflow and jumping back and forth between different projects, I personally just stay in the box most of the time now.
So let's say you're like mastering something more pop sounding, maybe that genre, right? Even because everything, even in like our world, the worship world, it's just pop music really a lot, and how it's mastered and mixed. What kind of like plug-in chain like would you use then? Typically, maybe it's not. We know that it's different for either song and what they're wanting and stuff. But what kind of like chain would you kind of run for that, like a channel strip chain?
Totally. I always try to see, because every plugin you add, even if it's not doing anything, it changes the sound a little bit. So I try to be as minimal as possible and just add as needed. So I would probably start with, an EQ. Pro Q4 is awesome. The Sontec EQ plugin is really cool for mastering. There's another one called the Sonic EQ that's just real clean that I really like for mastering and end up using a lot. But the Fab Filter is cool because you can get into mid-side and, cut more low end on the sides and create some width that way if needed. So I would start with like a Pro Q and a limiter, like an ozone maximizer or Pro L limiter or even Waves L3 can be the right thing. And fix any EQ issues first. And it's always usually, I shouldn't say always, but usually real small things with mastering, like a dB here, a half dB here, and just kind of create, fixing and pulling out things that, especially on a pop thing, just making sure the vocal feels right, and is up front. So you might boost some like 1 to 2K for that, just a little bit. So yeah, minimal EQ, and then try a few different limiters out. And, it's funny, every song reacts differently to every limiter. So I feel like for me, I just try a few different things until it's like, doing the least amount of harm to it and kind of pushing into that. And then, you're reacting to what the limiter's doing and maybe doing some more EQ. And if it needs it, like some compression or parallel compression, like an SSL bus compressor, or I like that for pop because it can kind of clean up some transients. And then maybe like an Oxford inflator for some harmonics. And there's a lot of plugins that I like to try. Sometimes even that Gullfoss master is fun.
Okay.
It can get real bright and crispy and do too much real quick, but that's kind of what maybe a typical chain would look like to start.
So you said that you like to use stuff that like maybe sounds the best out of the few limiters you tried. And you said also like it gets a little too much on certain things. So how did you discover that? How did you discover that was too much? Was it because just listening to other music, or like the artist or whoever produced it, let's say it wasn't you, was just like, no, that's too much. And then you just figured it out from there? Or what is too much? What is that standard? How do you figure it out?
I think for limiters, they all start to distort at a certain point. And, part of it, discovering what too much was, upgrading my monitors, upgrading my headphones. And I got this really killer headphone amplifier before I got these monitors that I have in here. And
what are you using for monitors and the headphone amplifier?
I've got some ATC monitors in here that those were such a game changer. I had some Focals in here before, and as soon as I got the ATCs, I was hearing way smaller of EQ differences, and it made more sense. Like, oh yeah, we need to cut 300 here or boost 700. Like, the ATCs are awesome. And then I've got the Little Labs monitor headphone amp, and I use that with my Sennheiser HG650s just to kind of get the room out of the equation and check things on headphones too. And when I got this headphone amp, I had been working on a song and, just in the mixing stage, and heard all this distortion that I had never heard. I had no idea it was even in the song, like just dynamics make more sense. And so knowing your monitors and headphones is a big part of kind of hearing what is too much. And I've definitely had artists too come and it's like, hey, this is a little too slammed, let's back that off a little bit. So just kind of over time, I feel like a lot of times my natural, I try to maybe push it a little too far and then back off on that. And that's kind of where you find the happy medium, and always checking, the unmastered mix to make sure you're not way off from what everyone was already liking too.
Yeah. So you're telling me that you need to do just a little bit more than slap Ozone 11 on there and push learn, and it does it for you. That's why.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. I bought that thing because it said it does it for me.
I was looking at Apple's mastering thing, and when I put it on, and then it just says it's mastered,
and then you go,
and then it shows me the EQ, and it is anything but subtle.
It's
like,
not subtle.
Yeah. like wow, man. Yeah. But that's kind of an interesting point. Like walking into kind of the digital realm where these tools like Lander and what Logic has and all these different things. What like I know that there is, I understand the why of like, hey, I know people need something a little more than that. How does peak mastering fit in that world, and what does it bring to the table that Lander and Logic and stuff doesn't?
Totally.
And why are you trying to replace yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question too.
Great question. Good. I hadn't thought. No. So
wait a minute. Hold on. After he's done.
Yeah, I've not. This is over.
Wait. Yeah, you're
That's
right.
Funny.
So for me, just kind of based on my taste and thankfully feedback from other people who have been using it. And I think, I've heard any other AI mastering platforms do great things, and I've heard some not so great things. And so I think they're all just different tools. It's like having different plugins, maybe one works great on one song and doesn't work so great on another song. But, for a long time, I just kind of, I tried it when it came out because it was real exciting, Lander or whatever. And I was like, this doesn't really sound like my mix anymore. And
that ain't it.
Yeah, it gets it always seemed to get like really crispy. I'm like, all of a sudden my acoustic guitar doesn't sound like an acoustic guitar anymore. It sounds like somebody's scraping glass over things.
That's my preferred sound, actually.
Oh, well, that explains why your guitar looks the way it does.
You're right, yeah.
Stop using glass as a guitar
glass
pick.
on my guitar pick.
And some people like that, but
yeah, they do. Yeah, and they're wrong.
But yeah, for me,
we have strong opinions here. Well, I do. I'm sorry.
I do
too. I just don't say them.
Yeah. We'll bring them out, man. We'll all be friends.
But yeah, so I always just kind of felt like maybe, in Ozone too, again, I've used the Ozone Learn thing, kind of as like a feedback tool just to see like, how much is it doing? And maybe, if it's cutting a whole bunch of lower mid-range, I don't roll with what it's done, but maybe it's a good indicator that there's something wrong there. Gotcha. And then like some of the AI mastering things, I've always just gotten the feeling that maybe, I don't know how they work under the hood, but it seems like maybe it's the louder is better thing a lot of times.
Yes, and
it's that is important when you're competing with what's on the radio, because a lot of times that is loud. But it just kind of seems like it's hyping the top end, maybe hyping the low end, crushing it loud, so that your initial reaction is, oh, this is better. It's like smiley face, scooped.
Yeah, I was about to say smiley faces all around.
And I know people that use it, for demos and love it. And maybe it's just not my taste, but the peak mastering,
sure.
I might be biased, since I'm making it, but I think it's just, it's not going to do anything super drastic. And I really put a lot of work into, just trying to make it subtly shape an already great mix, hopefully just into something, it is making it louder. It's limiting it a lot of times, but not like it's all based on, the different genre choices, kind of what is standard in the genre. And I'm kind of hand tuning it to, you can't always be one size fits all, but, for the genre, it's just like this should be a good starting point, or this should at least give you good feedback of, if it sounds a certain way after running it through that, maybe it's your mix needs a little bit more work,
This is wildly inexpensive. You've made this you've made this very affordable. I mean, everything. I love that there's like, oh, do you want 10, we can do 10 masters, and I think it's like what, $5 or something like that, right? Maybe I shouldn't say prices because it's about to go up because Robbie's going to become huge in a second,
Right.
Once we post our thing.
Yeah,
But,
definitely.
But it's very, very affordable, right? And then even like subscription things is like, yeah, unlimited masters for like $5 a month or something. Like, what's your thinking behind that? Do you hate money?
I
Is
do.
it inexpensive because it's so bad? Is that what it is?
Hopefully not. If I need
I
to,
believe people would call that cheap.
if I need to raise the price just for the perception of quality, then maybe I should. But no, I just kind of thought, again, maybe once there's more people using it. I just think for the typical use case, it's just me creating it. And so there's not like a team of people that all need to get paid or investors that need to get paid. And so, I definitely want it to be worth the time that I'm putting into it. And, the server costs and all that, like that does cost money. But I also see it's just like a weird middle ground of, you can pay a mastering engineer $75, $150, $300, $500 a song, depending on who you hire.
Wow.
And, that's definitely worth it if that's the person that you want working on your song. But then, there's other AI mastering that, as I was looking at them, you go to upload your song for distribution and it's like, have AI master your song, just $5 a track. And to me, that felt like too expensive for someone who wants to just run demos through it, as like a consistent part of their process. And so I would just rather have more people using it and giving me feedback and, helping me make it a better tool. Then I've just always gravitated towards, software in general that feels fair and not greedy. I don't know.
I understand that completely.
So you've used this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've played around with
what did you think of it? Have you put it on some demos of yours?
Yeah. I thought it was great. One of the things I really like about it is I feel like it's descriptive. It's like more descriptive than a lot of other things. You see like, oh, do you want it clear, transparent, hyped, or whatever? And I'm just like, I don't really know. I'm like, how is clear different than transparent? Isn't that the same thing? Like, whereas what you've done is you kind of have your preset set as like acoustic, warm, and then like descriptors, like if it's more of a vintage sound or it's more natural, this is a great fit. There's a modern worship setting,
Oh, really?
which I was going to ask you, like, what goes into a modern worship setting? Like, what should we expect to hear from that? What are you aiming for when you think about that? Let's just call it a genre of music.
Totally. So that one was just kind of looking at, the current, at the time of making that preset, what is kind of top of the charts in that genre. But also,
So you erase all the guitars. Just erase all the guitars.
No
That's
guitars,
gone now.
a bunch of bass.
Yeah,
And,
it's
just
really-
bass and drums. It's
really sophisticated AI that can just take all the
So good.
guitars
just
and replace
amps the
it.
reverb up.
Yeah.
you know?
So good. Yeah. That's funny.
But what does it actually do?
Sorry, we digress a lot.
Yeah, sorry. I feel like we're doing pretty well today.
Yeah, we're doing pretty good today. Yeah. We're doing pretty good.
You're such a fascinating guest.
Yeah.
I'm having fun. So so like I'm, looking at what's working, but also, applying my personal taste to, like this song is number one, but I honestly don't think it sounds that good, so like trying to like find what actually sounds good and then just create a profile based on, again, my personal taste, but also what is current in the genre. And so that's kind of part of the plan, is to constantly be creating new presets and, hopefully getting feedback for, what people would find more useful. Like I had a guy message me as I was kind of asking for feedback, and he was like, maybe you could blend like the country radio preset with something with a little more bass, like the 808 thing, to kind of account for that. So, maybe there would be, it might get a long list if, someone likes the Modern Worship version 1, but I've updated it. But, hopefully it stays current with what's working in the genre, and that list, without getting out of hand, can grow and be more useful. Once I've set up the basic processing, it's not hard to add presets and tweak, which is fun.
Have you thought about doing any collaborations with other like mastering engineers and being like, such and such is like, okay, because I don't have a name. Shoot, he just left my mind. I met him just not too long ago. Chris Lord Algae. Let's just say.
I was actually going to guess Chris Lord.
Well, there you go.
And I didn't even know.
Well, let's just say you guys are best friends all of a sudden. You're like, hey, dude, would you love to have a preset? Would you ever collaborate with somebody like that? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Totally. Yeah. I that thought has crossed my mind, and I'm totally open to things like that. I think that could be really cool, if it's something that, whoever it is excited about and feels like, their sound could add value to it. I love my go-to mastering engineer, when I send things off for like it mostly ends up being country projects, but he just released a plugin, and so I love collaborations like that, and would be very open to that if it made sense.
Okay, so was the most recent thing you showed me of yours mastered by him?
Yes, that was mastered by Robbie.
Gotcha.
With real ears.
With real ears, there you go.
Yeah.
I listened to that the other day, and it was very impressive, man. It was very cool. I really liked it because I heard the old tracks.
Yep.
Other masters, maybe. Right?
Yeah, just.
No, he's the master.
Yeah, he's the master of the masters.
The master of the masters. Yeah, that's amazing. But thank you, Robbie, so much for taking some time and spending it with us today. And like he said, giving us a little bit of knowledge. But I am excited to see your product. Again, what is it called and where can people find it?
Peak Mastering, and it's just peakmastering.com. And yeah, you go there and you can sign up. You get 3 for free, and email me if you have any questions, and
Perfect.
Hopefully let me know if you like it, and if you have any issues or if it crashes on you, let me know that too.
We count on people to tell us those things also.
Yeah.
Every once in a while something weird happens.
With the website.
We had something happen the other night. It was like it happened at 2 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
where like our host just decided to change something that like broke the whole website. And you're like, that was cool, guys. Thanks.
Great time to do
Just
that.
started getting an influx of messages. They're like, hey, it's Saturday. I got to practice this for tomorrow. It's funny because I had a bunch of worship leaders that their team would reach out to them and be like, hey, this isn't working, our service. And they're like, well, why are you now starting to practice?
Why is it just happening now?
Yeah, you should have
Oh, I was practicing for next month.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
That's
gotcha.
how they do
Not
it.
for tomorrow.
Yeah, be
that
on
makes
top
sense.
of it.
Just
That's
learning
amazing.
everything
Awesome.
on the way.
Right, yeah. But thank you, man. Appreciate your time. And we do hope that you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me.
Cool, man. Talk to you later.
See y'all.
Good stuff.